Hi, welcome to our session. Thank you very much for joining us. We are going to talk about how to employ the Salesforce login functionality in order to secure an application built in Heroku. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Rosa Martinez. I'm senior software engineer. I work in the DevOps team at Salesforce.
Good morning, I'm Agustina Garcia. I work as principal software engineer in Salesforce. I'm also Salesforce MVP, and here you can find our Twitter and email in case that you want to contact us later. Let me start with a quick introduction about our company. Salesforce is the #1 cloud ERP, and for SFDC customer, using Salesforce is a no-brainer because we seamlessly connect their front office activities with their back office. We have different products like accounting, product automation, and some others. We have offices across the globe, but our headquarters is here in San Francisco. However, we have offices in Harrogate, UK, and in Granada, Spain, where Rosa and myself are based.
This is today's agenda. First of all, we will introduce a use case, then we will explain the issues we found and how we technically solved them, and finally we will have time for some takeaways and questions and answers. Our use case. Let's imagine I am the owner of an agency and I want to offer to my users a website in order to do their own bookings of the hotel. I want to store my information in Salesforce, but I want to do a separate website out of Salesforce. In this case, we are going to do it in Heroku. The reason is that it's a very flexible platform. I can choose the language I prefer in order to develop that website. We can also scale by adding more dynos in order to get better performance. We are going to do it with Node.js for the backend and React for the frontend.
Okay, but this session we are going to focus just on a single topic. We need to log in into our web application in Heroku, as well as into Salesforce, where all our data lives. Rosa, let's talk about the risk that we found at the very beginning of our project.
Well, we need to have two different things. Our data in Salesforce, and we also need to have a website in Heroku, and we need to connect them. In order to get that, we are going to use connected apps.
Also, we need to just allow authorized users to log in into our application. They need a user and a password, but how should we create a brand new page when Salesforce already provide one to us? With ready-to-use login system, we can take advantage of their own login page, as well as using real username and passwords.
And finally, if I have several users in my organization and I want to allow some of them the access to our website but doesn't allow the access to some others, I need to make a difference between them. In order to get this, we are going to use permission sets. And with all these points covered, I will have my agency owner happy.
Great. So let us start talking in deep about these 3 points. First of all, connected apps. This feature will allow you to create a connection between your Salesforce organization and an external website. So in our case, our HotelRA will be able to connect with Salesforce, get the information, the data that we have inside, and also when we do a booking, we can also send that information into Salesforce in order to create new records. If we go to the app manager, to the setup with the app, we can see the list of connected apps. We can find that any brand new Salesforce have already few connected apps already created, like Heroku Connect or for data loaders, so that we can use these tools without having to do any setup on our side. Rosa, do you know if we can create a connected app in a declarative way?
Yeah. It is pretty simple. Here, from the app manager, we can see we have that button, the new connected app. If we click there, we will start the process in order to create a new connected app and make possible that connection between Heroku and our organization. Mm-hmm. The first step in this process is introduce some basic details, like the name we want to assign to that connected app, the API name, and a contact email. And then later, we will need to introduce some more technical details, like the callback URL, which is the URL that we will use in our application to navigate after the login process, and also we will need to specify some OAuth scopes that are the permissions this connected app will have in our organization.
And finally, when you save the connected app, two fields will be populated automatically, consumer key and consumer secret. Both values are necessary when you have to do the login in a programmatically way.
Cool.
Okay, let's continue with permission sets. That is another tool that helps you to create a login process secure enough. In general, a permission set is a click-no code tool that gives you rights in order to be able to access to different features and tools. So for example, we can create a permission set that gives you read access to an account and assign to user 1 and 2. Then create another permission set with write access to account and assign to user 2 and 3. So that user 1 will be able to only read accounts, user 3 to just write or create accounts, and user 2 will be able to do both actions, read and create. Rosa, how can we take advantage of them?
Well, we can create a new permission set specifically to be linked to this connected app we have just created. Here, from the permission sets, we see there's a new button. If we click there, we will start again a new process, but in this case, in order to create a new permission set, we will need to specify some details like the label and the API name and a description if we want it. And once this is saved, we will be able to use these manage assignment buttons. By clicking there, we will be able to see a list of existing users in our organization, and we can select some of them in order to assign that permission set we have just created. Once this is saved, if we go back to our connected app setup, we can edit that permitted user field in order to set this as user are pre-authorized, and then we will be able to see that box with the permission sets. We will be able to see a list of available permission sets in our organization. We can select one or more than them. And finally, we see that now we have linked that permission set to our connected app.
Yeah. So in a similar way that the simple use case of account works, now we have a permission set assigned to this connected app, and then if we assign this permission set to the user 1 and 3, both will be able to log in into our HotelRA application. However, user 2, even though he is a real Salesforce user, he will not be able to access to our application.
Good. Let's talk about the ready-to-use login system. First, we are going to do a little demo, and then we will explain how it works. This is our HotelRA application. As you can see, first, we are not inside the application itself. First, we need to do the login. If we click here, we will start the process. We have been redirected to the login page of Salesforce. I need to use my credentials of my user. Something is happening, and then I'm redirected back to the application, and now I can see the welcome page.
So maybe with this diagram, you can understand a little bit better what is happening behind the scene. When the user clicks on login button, our Heroku application is going to send information to Salesforce to see if the user is authorized or not.
What our organization does in order to check if it's a valid user is showing to the user the login page. Then the user needs to use his credentials, his user and password. Then the organization checks if the credentials were valid and also if that user had the proper permission set assigned. With all that information, the organization sends back a response to our Heroku application. In the case everything went well, we will receive an OK response, and our application will show the welcome page. But in the case something went wrong during the login, we will show again the login page to the user and the proper error.
Great. Let's see how works this failure use case. Thank you. So here we have another user. Let me copy. Yeah. And if I scroll down, you can see that this user hasn't got any permission set assigned. If I log out, and go to my HotelRA application, click on login, enter the credentials, and this user is now authorized to go into our application, so that we get this error message. Let's continue with the presentation.
Until now, we have been talking only about reusing clicks not go features, but in order to get a successful connection between our application in Heroku and our organization, we need to code a bit. In this case, we have been using a library called Node.js Force, written in Node.js, that help us in order to handle that type of connections.
And that's the moment that most of you have been waiting for, see some pieces of code. This piece of code is going to be to handle requests and responses from and to Salesforce. As Rosa was mentioning, we are using the JS Force and Node.js library, and with the connection, we are going to make the request to Salesforce. This piece of code, these lines, are similar to any web application that you can create, and you can try to do the connection to Salesforce. Then, the next step is to handle the response. What we have done, you can do something similar, or maybe you can handle the response in a different way. What we do is to retrieve the error message that we get if there is any failure, and we will store in this attribute in error, and also we have two more attributes, success and logged in. Both will have false as a value. However, if everything works fine, I don't have any error message, both attributes will be true, so that I can realize if the value is true, everything works fine, I will navigate to the welcome screen and allows the end user to continue with the next action. However, if there is any issue, like the permission set 1, and these values in the attributes will be false, I will keep in the login page, and I will show the error message that we showed before.
Yep. And now we are going to explain how to add a couple of extra layers of security to this application. First, we will implement a middleware. What a middleware does is creating or adding a new previous step to any request that the user does to our application and check if it's a valid user. Instead of sending with every request the user again to the login page, what we do is once we receive the response from the organization, storing in a persistent memory of our server the details of that connection. There you can see a couple of new lines. And then with every request that the user does, we go to our memory. In this case, we are using the cache memory, but we can also use the database in order to store the details of all the connections. And we check if the details of the connection of that user is within the list of stored details. With that, what we are checking with every request is this is a valid user, and we avoid sending the user one time and another time to the login page.
Great. And finally, we can also use Cloudflare. That is another software. It's not Salesforce, it's not a Heroku add-on, something different. But it will help you to make restrictions on the URL access, so that you can, for example, say that just this range of IPs will be able to access to this URL.
Good. So, what we have learned during this session is how to reuse the login page that provides Salesforce to us in order to make a more secure application built in Heroku.
Then we have been talking about these 3 existing Salesforce tools. We don't need to reinvent the wheel, just use them. And with them, we have a secure enough login process.
And that's true, it was secure enough, but finally we had also time in order to explain how to implement a couple of extra security layers by the implementation of a middleware and also the IP restriction provided by Cloudflare.
Great. And that's all. It's time for question and answers, but I will leave this slide with the links of our resources, the resources that we use in order to prepare the session.
We have still some minutes, so it's time to questions. If you have any of them.
No?
No?
Okay, in that case, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of Dreamforce.